The most unsettling discovery does not have to do with anger management, but with the way certain people stop being governable by the everyday rituals that try to provoke a response from them. The issue is not psychological in a narrow sense, but political. How are docile subjects produced through emotion? What happens when someone, without turning to stone or repressing what they feel, stops obeying the grammar of offense, moral mandate, guilt, and the need to justify themselves? From a Foucauldian reading, this phenomenon is not explained with metaphors of personal shadows, but with the mapping of the dispositives that shape conduct: demanded confessions, constant evaluations, small domestic inquisitions, workplace metrics, gossip, and sermons that aim to order lives. Anger, shame, wounded pride, and automatic defense are, quite often, parts of a normalization machine. When someone doesn't get hooked, the disturbing thing is not their coldness, but their resistance to being captured. Heinrich, that post-war entrepreneur, is an instructive example. He is neither an indifferent ascetic nor a cynic. He observes, knowing who is speaking, from what position, with what interest, and according to which rules, grants him an interval of freedom between the other's gesture and his own action. What to many sounds like a mystical void is rather a micro-political act, identifying the regime at play. The wife who confesses an affair, the employees who test his patience, the rival who incriminates him in public, each makes interpolations that, if accepted as they come, establish a hierarchy. Heinrich suspends reflex obedience, not because he doesn't care, but because he distinguishes between the fact and the technique of government that seeks to manage it. In that distinction lies non-reactivity, a minimal space in which words lose their aura of verdict and are exposed for what they are, acts with a function. Let's bring this to ordinary life, far from steel empires. A mother tells her daughter, "With that degree you'll starve." It isn't neutral advice, but a tactic of guidance through fear of precarity, inherited from generations that learned to survive by obeying. A boss hints, in a paternal tone, that we must be more proactive, precisely when targets are unattainable. It isn't mere motivation, but a downward reallocation of risk, so that guilt lands on the worker. A friend accuses, "Since you're doing well, you forgot about us." It isn't a diagnosis, but an effective negotiation to re-establish dependencies. If we accept those statements as truth about us, we become their effects. If we read them as moves on a board, the game changes. We can respond without ceding authority over our worth. The school of normalization teaches early. We learn to fear what people will say, to confess to be forgiven, to compete for crumbs of recognition, to react to prove that we care. The one who doesn't react seems arrogant, passive, or dangerous. In reality, they may be doing something else, calibrating what they hand over their inner governance to. It isn't a wall, but an economy of exposure. Not every discourse has a right of residence in your interior. Not every emotion deserves to be adopted as identity. Not every urgency of another is a moral obligation. The person who begins to act like this changes texture. They talk less about themselves, explain themselves less, and ask better questions. Provocation is no longer an irresistible hook. Criticism ceases to be a verdict. What others say becomes situated information and not an ontological order. This does not immunize against pain nor promise emotional levitation. Sadness, anger, and fear still arrive, but they stop arriving in the capacity of foremen. When someone hurts you, It's legitimate to feel pain. What becomes optional is allowing that wound to dictate your behavior under the threat of shame or the thirst for retaliation. Sometimes anger is clean energy that pushes a boundary. Other times, it's a ferocious presentism that makes you dance to the pusher's rhythm. Freedom here is not feeling. It is not outsourcing the helm. An insult can pass through you and still not govern you. A critique can be valuable to you and still not assimilate as a label. Someone else's silence can hurt and still not push you into self-accusation. Some fear this gesture will lead to moral coldness. Foucault would respond, "The suspicion is reasonable. This is why the work does not end with refusing to be led. Parrhesia is missing. The frank speech that lays out one's position without demanding the other's confession or defeat. Parrhesia does not aim to humiliate or win arguments. It seeks to open breathable air. When someone attacks you, you can state calmly, 'I hear your judgment, and I do not grant it authority over my worth. If there's an operational problem, we'll correct it. If there's an agenda, let's make it transparent.' In the office, that tone disarms the dramaturgy of guilt and makes manipulation more difficult. At home, it allows you to sustain the bond without absorbing the other's chaos or returning it amplified. It's not about always coming out the winner, but about removing from the circuit the emotional obedience that shrinks you. The culture of performance tries to close that interstice. It makes us measurable, comparable, watchable, demandable. In that regime, reacting quickly and strongly is mistaken for being authentic. The theater of instantaneity blocks reflection. From where do I speak? To whom do I speak? For what do I speak? The one who sustains 1 second more of awareness breaks the chain. That second is political. In it, you can rename the situation. This is not me being insufficient. It's a negotiation in disguise. This is not them hating me. It's an allocation of resources legitimated by moralism. This is not me being defective. It's a structure that needs me guilty to maintain its pace. By changing the name, you change the reach of what touches you. Over time, that practice transforms the whole room. The person who used to chase every critique as if it were a debt starts sleeping better. The other's agenda loses privilege in their calendar. Days recover blank spaces without justification. Conversation with close ones becomes more honest and less theatrical. I don't need to stage offenses to be taken seriously, nor do I need to display tears for my pain to be valid. The rituals of confession that demand you explain yourself over and over diminish. Conflicts don't disappear, but they no longer drag the sticky residue of programmed resentment. Sometimes relationships tighten. Some people depend on your reactivity to regulate their anxiety. When you don't react as before, they press harder. It's logical. Their affective economy is exposed. If you remain steady, the real emerges. Either they learn to find you without pushing you, or their way of relating runs out. In both cases, clarity is a good. The workplace is a laboratory of these micro-politics. The leader who knows how to hold center can hear a client's fury, translate it into concrete requirements, and return a plan without surrendering dignity. The team learns, by imitation, that pressure is not discharged onto the weakest link. The frozen panic that only produces cosmetic corrections is deactivated. The organization improves not through a mystique of composure, but because less energy is wasted dancing appeasement rituals. When calm becomes structure, creativity stops asking fear for permission. It is worth recognizing, without fantasies, the opposite temptation, to become an entomologist of human behavior and lose tenderness. Lucidity, without care, turns into irony. The one who sees the mechanism too soon may mock it and despise the one still trapped. That superiority is another prison. It isolates you and robs you of the possibility of building spaces where others can breathe as well. The way out again becomes a practice, seeing the operation without dehumanizing the operator. The person who attacks you may be terrified, may be repeating a learned script, may be defending themselves from an inclement inner judge. Recognizing this does not excuse the harm, but prevents your response from reproducing the very logic you claim to question. You can set boundaries firmly while refusing to turn the other into a caricature. And what if all this were not a self-help technique, but a small ethics for times of saturation? An ethics that doesn't preach invulnerable heroes, but adults who assume authorship of their responses, who do not celebrate thick skin for its own sake, but sensitivity administered with wisdom, who do not confuse kindness with compliance, nor firmness with hardness, who know how to cry without turning tears into blackmail, and to get angry without delegating the governance of their actions to anger, who listen without swallowing the bait, who ask without subjugating, who love without tallying humiliations, and who withdraw without blowing up temples. Heinrich did not become a better person by not getting angry. He became freer because he stopped accepting that someone else's anger would define his world. He learned to identify where responsibility ends and theater begins. He learned to say no without editorializing. He learned to say yes without mortgaging tomorrow. And above all, he learned to be present without the presence being a minefield. That calm, rightly understood, is not the absence of passion. It is passion for clarity. Perhaps true insubordination is not to shout louder, but to listen with such precision that no shout ever governs you again. If anything in these lines brushed your intelligence or your courage, turn it into action. Subscribe, like, and share this message with anyone who needs to gesture. In the next word, in the next second of silence that returns the helm to you.